Most parents don't set out to start an argument. They're trying to explain, clarify, or resolve something small, and somehow the conversation turns tense anyway. A simple message about timing becomes a back and forth. A question turns into a long exchange. And afterward, you're left wondering how it escalated so quickly. There is a specific reason this happens. And most parents miss the real cause. The issue is not the topic of the conversation. It is how the conversation is structured from the very beginning. Many conversations start with more than one layer. There's the question, but also the explanation. There's the request, but also the frustration behind it. There's the information, but also an attempt to be understood. And once multiple layers are introduced, the conversation no longer has a single direction. Here's what that looks like in real life. You send a message like, "What time is pickup today? I just need to know because this keeps changing and it's been hard to plan." There is a clear question in that message, but there is also a statement about difficulty and an implied frustration. The other person can now respond to any of those layers. They might answer the time, they might respond to the frustration, or they might challenge the perception. That's where conversations begin to shift. In simple terms, more layers create more directions. Now here's where the situation becomes counterintuitive. Most people believe that explaining more will prevent misunderstandings. But in structured communication, explaining more often creates more opportunities for disagreement. Because every added sentence becomes something that can be interpreted, corrected, or reacted to. Let's look at another example. A message says, "You didn't send the update, and I really need better communication because this affects everything." There are at least 3 elements in that message: the missing update, the expectation, and the emotional impact. Now the response may focus on defending the delay instead of addressing the update itself. The conversation expands again. This is the pattern behind many arguments. You may have experienced this yourself. You send something that feels clear in your mind, but the response seems to come from a completely different direction. That moment often feels confusing. But the reason is not random. The message simply created too many entry points. Here's why that matters. When a conversation has multiple entry points, it becomes harder to keep it focused. The more focused a conversation is, the easier it is to resolve. So the goal is not to say everything. The goal is to guide the direction of the conversation from the start. Now let's talk about how to do that. The first shift is reducing each message to a single purpose. One question, one request, one piece of information. For example, instead of writing, "What time is pickup? I need to plan ahead because this has been difficult," the message becomes, "What time is pickup today?" Nothing extra. No added context. This limits how many ways the message can be interpreted. The second shift is separating communication from emotional processing. It is completely valid to feel frustrated or overwhelmed, but when those feelings are included in the message, they become part of the conversation structure. That invites a response. So instead of combining the two, they are handled separately. The message stays focused. The emotional processing happens outside of it. Put simply, communication solves logistics. Emotional processing supports your well-being. They serve different purposes. The third shift is responding only to what moves the situation forward. If a message includes multiple elements, you don't have to address all of them. For example, if you receive, "You're always late and it makes things harder. What time are you coming?" You can respond with, "I'll arrive at 5:15 p.m. You're answering the question, not the criticism. This keeps the conversation grounded. Now, let's look at a few simple scenarios to see how this plays out. Imagine a last-minute schedule change. Without structure, the response might include explanation, frustration, and multiple questions. That creates a longer exchange. With structure, the response becomes, "That time won't work. Available at 4 p.m." Clear. Direct. Another scenario. You receive a message that feels slightly sharp in tone. Without structure, your mind may try to interpret it. You may respond to the tone instead of the content. That often leads to escalation. With structure, you respond only to the content. The tone is not engaged. The conversation stays contained. One more example. You want to clarify something that has been happening repeatedly. Without structure, the message becomes long and detailed. With structure, you focus on the next step. Going forward, updates will be needed by 3 p.m. That's it. Over time, this approach changes the tone of communication entirely. Messages become shorter, responses become more direct, and conversations begin to resolve faster, because there is less to react to. In simple terms, fewer words create fewer arguments. And this is not about avoiding communication. It is about structuring it in a way that reduces unnecessary friction. Steady parenting is not about controlling every interaction. It is about creating systems that make those interactions easier to navigate. When communication is structured, conversations stop expanding unnecessarily. They become clearer, shorter, and more manageable. If you've ever found yourself wondering why a simple message turned into something bigger, it may not be the situation itself. It may be how the conversation was structured from the beginning. And small shifts in that structure can change everything over time. If this perspective resonates with you, you can stay tuned or turn on notifications to follow along as we continue building calm, structured approaches to co-parenting.